Hi there, and welcome to Flip the Script Silver Bullet Central, Episode 5, Classic Role Diffusion. My name is Becc Holland. I'm the CEO and founder of Flip the Script. Before we jump in, do me one tiny favor. If you go to flipthescript.co and make sure you download the deck so you can follow along at each step of the way. Once you've done that, let's go ahead and jump on in. So let's go ahead and jump into an agenda. Per usual, 4 pieces to the agenda. What is it? Why would you use it? When would you use it? And how do you use it? So let's start with what? Classic role diffusion is a pattern interrupt where you enter into the experience of someone, what someone would typically do in that role, and you mention it to diffuse the situation and help the prospect understand that you have self-awareness and that you know what's going on and that they probably don't really like it, but you have to do it anyway. So why would you do that? Number one, it diffuses the situation. So a great way to do this, let's say you have a pricing model. If you come in and you say, not to be the typical rep that, pitches you pricing that's way out of budget to start high, but blah, 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 blah. Number one, it's going to diffuse the situation with the buyer. Number two, it's going to help them to see you outside of that role. So if you are, let's say, working at Costco and you're in the customer service, branch of the business, you don't typically make the decisions on what the rules are. Sometimes you have to end up enforcing rules that you don't agree with. And so this helps you, the classic role diffusion helps you communicate that essentially you didn't make this decision and that you don't really want to be the type of person that has to do this, but you have to do it. And so it almost outsources the onus of what you're about to do, but it helps enable them to see you as a person, not someone who's doing this thing that you're about to do that they're probably not going to like. Number 3, it makes them see you as a human, so they treat you as one. A great session to understand how to do that more is the other car mentality, but basically you want to break out of the scenario where the person doesn't see you as a real human being, but sees you as a seller. Because if they see you as a seller, they can do all sorts of not fun things to you because you are a seller. So you want to enter in your identity, enter in your humanity into the situation. This is a great way to do that. Number 4, it enables you to do the action without repercussion. So essentially, there's some things that we just have to do. You have to ask for budget. You have to ask eventually if this is the person that signs on the dotted line, not at the on-site, but eventually you have to know the answer to that question. So this classic role diffusion enables you to basically do the action without the negative repercussion of them seeing you as the person who does that kind of thing because you're outsourcing essentially the onus of it. Number 5, it gets you out of the other car mentality. I mentioned this earlier, but if you go into the other car mentality that's in the Silver Bullet Central, it basically talks about this, but the other car mentality is when they see you as the other car on the road, meaning they don't know who you are, and so they're more willing to cut you off. They're more willing to get right in front of you and then turn right because they don't know who you are. So when you break out of that, you disrupt that pattern and you essentially help them see you as a person so that they're more likely to hold the door open for you, act respectfully, not make you go put together a proposal, tell you the real story because you actually have an identity behind the curtain. Number 6, it helps them avoid feeling like they're just another buyer. People don't like to be the one person that buys into something that no one else is buying into. So they don't want to be the one person that falls for something. And if you make them feel like they're just another buyer, that they're not special to you, that they're just someone who's buying the product, then it takes away some of that magic of the selling process. So you want to help enable them to feel like they are very special to you and they are very unique in the selling process. And if you're doing selling effectively, they are unique. Yes, people might buy the same product from you, but usually it's not for the same reasons. They'll say they're at different states of the business or different segment sizes or a different narrative or a different story. And if you're selling in the box, even the same solution, how you sell that solution or the reason why they buy it is usually very, very different. So you want to avoid making them feel like they're just the rote, average, everyday person, because then they're going to treat you like the rote, average, everyday seller, which is disadvantageous to you. So classic role diffusion is a way to make them feel special, make them feel heard, and make them feel unique, even if they are buying a product that 15 other people have bought from you that day. Number 7, it makes them feel that they can trust you and that you're self-aware. I think being self-aware is one of the pieces of trust because, no one likes to buy from a seller who's just going to jam their product down their throat, regardless of what they say. So if you classic role diffuse, it makes them feel like you understand, the emotional aptitude of what's going on in the situation. So you have high likelihood that you'll understand that down the road. And then number 8, it helps them understand that you do need the information. So typically, if you are deploying classic role diffusion, it's because you don't want to be the type of person that does something, but you also have to do this thing for a certain reason. So not only does it outsource the onus, and it makes them see you as like, hey, I'm just the one who enforces the policy here, unfortunately. I agree with you, but I do need to know, what this item looks like. But it helps them understand that you have to know that information at the same time, even though you don't want to be the type of person who asks for it. Number 3, when would you use this? So I'm going to give you a couple of examples, but full disclosure, this isn't necessarily an exhaustive list. Number 1, when you're asking discovery questions. Number 2, you're sending a second message, which can be annoying. Number 1, it can be annoying if you ask too many discovery questions. Number 3, when you're having to send a follow-up message. Number 4, when you're stating deadlines. Or 5, talking about pricing. The reason these are examples of when you can do it is because these are times, these are things that you have to do often that you don't really want to do. I don't want to talk about pricing all day long. I don't want to tell a prospect what my deadline is because it's not necessarily important to them. I don't think it's a great idea to tell everyone like, hey, can you buy my product because it's end of quarter? Help a sister out or whatever. It's like, okay, I get it that it's your end of quarter, but how does that help me as a buyer? So you want to find a way to do these behaviors. At the same time, they need to know that there is a deadline, that this offer is going to expire, or there's something that you need. So how do we do this in a way that makes them feel heard, understood, and like you're not the bad person, the villain, and the seller in the situation while still acquiring the information or getting the action item done? So let's talk about how we can use it. So number 1, you can talk about how you are being, here's a great example. Not to be the typical annoying sales rep here who's calling you out of the blue, but I saw this thing, et cetera, et cetera. So you're telling them that the typical sales rep is a typical annoying sales rep is someone who does call you out of the blue. So when you lead with that statement, you enable them to know that you are human, that you are self-aware of what you're doing, but it allows you to do it anyway, with still building rapport with them. Number 2, I'm starting to feel like I'm the overly aggressive sales rep that keeps calling you all day long, but et cetera, et cetera. This is for if you have to call someone who, maybe you have to call 2 or 3 times, like they just sent you an email and you need to call them a couple times to get a hold of them. Number 3, well, you know me, I'm just the person who keeps getting happy sales ears. So oftentimes someone will say like, hey, I think we might be good if we can get X, Y, and Z. And I'll say, I'm sorry, I blacked out. When I heard, I think we might be good, I heard that you're going to buy, right? That's how this works. I'm a salesperson. You just said yes. And so it kind of pattern interrupts, makes the situation a little bit, more free, liberating. And they realize that you aren't going to do that. You aren't the person who just heard a yes because you just stated it. So the quickest way to get someone to not view you as something is to call yourself that. So say, I'm the annoying sales rep. And then they're like, oh, she's not the annoying sales rep because she gets that this is something that could hypothetically be annoying. Number 4, I do this a lot at the end of calls. If I haven't added to a conversation, and sometimes like if I made an intro and then I'm on the call and then, someone else is running the call, and then at the end they go, Becc, what do you think? I'll say, oh, nothing really. I'm just your typical non-value add rep here on the call, wasting space. And then at least breaks down the conversation of like, hey, she wasn't the one who ran the demo. I would do this a lot as an SDR leader, or if someone, if I booked the demo and I wanted to hand it off to the account executive and they ran the call, but I also wanted to jump on the call to do some level of like context building, rapport building, et cetera, or just to get to know them or just to hear through live what the product pitch goes like. Then I would say, I would intro, give a little context, hand it over to the account executive. At the end, they'd be like, Becc, what do you think? And I'm like, well, it's clear that I didn't demo. So I'm like, just your typical non-value add SDR in the room here. And then at least build some rapport of like, there's awareness here. Another example, number 5, I would say if you're asking too many discovery questions, I'd be like, not to be the person who barrages you with discovery questions when all you wanted to see was a demo, but X, Y, and Z. So it enables you to ask some tough questions of like, hey, I only have one more question here and I will stop and just let you see the product. I see a lot of account executives falling victim here of like asking too many questions and not looking for the emotional awareness of this person just wanted the demo and that's what they wanted out of the situation. So this is a way to combine both. Number 6 here, not to be the awful rep that goes, tries to enforce my deadlines on you, but I need this thing by Wednesday, and you can give them a little bit of context. So it interrupts the pattern flow of like, hey, I'm not just saying I need this thing by Wednesday because they're like, I don't care. Like your deadlines mean nothing to me. You're a salesperson, right? So this interrupts that and says like, hey, not to be the one who pushes all my crap on you, but there actually is this reasoning, Wednesday we're doing X, Y, and Z, and you need to be a part of that, for context. So again, that's a good way to communicate a deadline, but also come off as human and someone who's self-aware in the situation. My sales ears perked up when you said, we don't use reporting. I use this before I dig into that. So I want to stop here for a second and just unpack this a little bit. I don't know if anyone out there, or if you're watching this, if you have seen the movie Armageddon. But if you haven't, I'm about to give you a recap. So you are in for a treat. Armageddon is a movie where essentially there is a big meteor that is coming for Earth. And essentially the US government wants to send up a drilling team, a team who has drilled for oil, including Ben Affleck and Bruce Willis, and wants to send them out there and basically drill into the meteor so they can set down a bomb into the meteor, send it down the chute and blow up the meteor so that the pieces will miss Earth. But it has to be within a certain time context. And so it is very, very important. The reason that they bring on drillers or people who are used to working on an oil rig is because they need a team that is familiar with drilling, because if they don't drill far enough into the meteor, then they will essentially drop the bomb, 10, 20, 30 feet deep, and it will blow off the surface, but not separate the core of the meteor. Oftentimes, whenever we're selling, someone will offer up a pain point. They'll say like, yeah, my reporting's not that great. And I know that in our heart starts racing. We're like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what we solved for. Like this person just said the thing. They said the magic words that they gave me the pain that we solved for. And so I know that we want to dig in there. And I know that every instinct in our mind, at least I'll speak for myself, and my mind says, sell them. Sell them, sell them, sell them, sell them, sell them. Like, close them. They just said the pain point. But in my experience, whenever we try and sell them, whenever they just mention the pain point, essentially we drop the bomb at 10 or 15 feet deep and it just blows off the surface, but doesn't get to the root pain and story that's behind the problem. So your job, if you're in selling, is certainly not to product push. It is to understand your buyer and their day-to-day. And if they potentially are going to buy your product, why they would buy your product from the detailed perspective. So whenever I have been in situations where basically one marquee in my head, they were using our competitor. And they countered to an SDR and they brought the response to me where they said, yeah, so I'm in sales enablement and so I'm not really using the tool, but I know that the sellers are apparently relatively happy X, Y, and Z. Sales enablement was one of our core buyer personas. And so I believe that this was a, vice president of a global team. So there's someone who really knows the selling world and their sales enablement. So they know that mentioning a pain point like that, what they're opening themselves into. So TLDR, they were kind of encouraging it a little bit of saying like, well, I'm not in the tool, but my reps seem to say this. So one of the problems is, why is the sales enablement leader not in the tool? Do they not see value in the tool? Do they not like the coaching scorecards, et cetera, et cetera? And so that is a major pain point, and your sales lights go off of like, oh, this person's not in the tool, which means they have a pain with my competitor. And so I'm going to go and I'm going to close them there. But instead I said, hold off, don't go in there. And I want you to lead with a classic role diffusion statement. She said, what do you mean? I said, what would a typical sales rep do in this instance? She said, close them. Say like, oh, you're not using it. That's great. Why don't we jump on the phone? I said, do you think though that's deep enough? She said, no. So why not? She said, I don't know him. I don't really know this person, so I haven't built rapport. So if I transition into sales mode, then it's over. This person sees me as a seller, and essentially I'm going down that path. And like, it is very time intensive to have to change software. So like, if this person really had that pain point, they would have already reached out to us. But this is an outbound deal. So this person was making do, essentially. So I was like, I'm going to give you a hug. I just got goosebumps that you're reading the situation that way. So what do you want to do? She said, well, the typical person and the classic person within this role would say like, hey, I want to close you. So I said, okay, why don't we do this instead? We can call that out. Say, hey, prospect, let's call him John. Hey, John, my sales ears, thank you for the context. Thanks for the overview of your team. It was really helpful. To be honest, my sales ears perked up when you said, I'm not in the tool. Being a sales enablement platform, if I were a typical sales rep, I would billow in with all of my questions of why you're not in the tool and try and counter you and sell you there. But instead, you mentioned this thing above where you were asking about X, Y, and Z, and I had her counter to ask a question to the prospect. So your prospect, especially if you are selling into a sales ICP and marketing ICP, they are a fan of the game. They know how sales, good, bad, and great sales happens. So if you are selling into an ICP, there is heightened sensitivity here. But I'd say they know when they offer a pain point that essentially they are communicating to you that they want to buy. So you want to sidestep that and say, hey, call that out. My sales ears perked up whenever you said we don't use reporting. My sales ears perked up whenever you said I'm not in the tool. But instead of just pitching you here, you mentioned this thing, and I was curious to know X, Y, and Z. You're communicating to them that while someone else might be playing checkers or some rudimentary game, you are on the side of your prospect and you're an advocate of them. And instead of trying to pitch them without information, you want to know more about their team. And so this is a high communication that you're an advanced person in the industry and that you're doing what you did in the beginning to cover up lack of product knowledge, but on purpose this time, because you know that knowing your buyer is the first key to being successful in sales. Number 8. Apparently your girl can't add. Not to be the person who can't add while she's on camera. Just kidding. Here's number 8. Here's the classic checking back in email. But in all seriousness, I use this one a lot. If I have to check back in with someone, I need to be very, very time intensive about finding something that's valuable to them that's worth checking in on. Hey, I have this article, I have this network connection, I have this referral, I want to thank you for this thing, You should be monomaniacal about finding a reason or way to value sell. If you want to know more on that, if you go into season 2, I believe it's episode 3, but I talk about 9 ways to keep a prospect warm who stalled until Q1, during the pandemic. But there is a comprehensive list of all the ways that you could really add value to someone without having to check back in. So the checking back in email, I don't know if this is going to be the shot heard around the world, is tired. We do not need to be just checking back in for no reason, because essentially at that point you're communicating of like, hey, I have no value to add here and I need something out of you. So I'm going to check back in or follow back up, so that I can see if enforce my deadlines upon you. So if you're going to do this, then I would say always have value whenever you're sending any email. So do not send an email. From my perspective, I would instruct my teams, do not send an email unless you have something to add. Some piece of information, contact, etc. But a good way to pair in with that of, here's the classic checking back in email. All seriousness, I did have this article that I wanted to throw your way. I thought point number 3 would be really, really valuable. So, you're doing well hope you're doing well with everything going on. Let me know if I can be of any help. This will usually, in my experience, it has done it to me this week. It actually happened to me yesterday, where I said, hey, I wanted to add this piece of value, and I did, and I legitimately had a piece that I was like, you're going to need to know this, but there was an agenda item that was open on their end. And so, this usually is going to trigger not a response to the value add, but a response to the question that you had that was outstanding. So at minimum, again, this is my experience, they're going to send both. thanks so much for this, piece of content or whatever. BTW, this is what's going on with this situation. So if you need an update, no problem. Just be sure to add some piece of value. And Pat, you want to do some level of interrupt of classic role diffusion of, hey, here's a typical rep that's checking back in with this email. All seriousness, I do have this article that I thought of when I saw it the other day. I thought of you when I saw it the other day. Love point number 3. You might want to check it out. Either way, hope you're doing well, and thanks for all the help you've been so far. Number 9, here's a convenient check-in when there's something in it for me. This is expansion selling. So if you are not checking back in, if you are not in the habit of knowing your buyer post-sale, I would say expansion selling, it becomes extremely difficult. So your sale for expansion selling is predicated on how well people use the product off of the jump. But if you haven't checked back in a while and you haven't been really involved with them, I would say, number 1, go check out the expansion selling session over in season 2. I believe it's episode 14, mental math 14 on expansion selling, the playbook you can run there. So you make sure that you prevent it in the future. But if you're there, then I'd say, here's a convenient check-in from a rep who hasn't been here when there's something in it for me. I saw X, Y, and Z. So your best case scenario here, again, is that you are there from the beginning. But if not, then this is your best case scenario, that you do some level of classic role diffusion so that they know that at least you're aware. So hopefully you have the leverage and the, oomph to fix it moving forward. And then the last one, here I am telling you it's a quick, low pressure conversation when it's not. See a lot of people asking me for a quick question, or a quick chat, or a quick call, or a brief, quick. And I'm like, well, it's going to be at least 45 minutes. They're all the same length. And it's not like, I'm like, oh, okay. Well, if it's quick, let's go ahead and schedule the call. So I would say, if you have told someone that it was going to be a quick call, this is a good way to interrupt the patterns that people are mostly doing. So, everything that everyone else is doing, I'd be very astute to it in the selling industry and then call that out right at the beginning of the call. And so they're like, oh, this is not the rep that's going to do that thing, because at least they're aware that this is going on. And the more niche that you can be of like everyone does it, but no one really talks about doing that, the better. So in summary, I know we are salespeople, and not to be the annoying sales trainer that tells you what to do, but I think we have a great opportunity that we have in front of us. That opportunity is to become human again. That opportunity is to know some of the habits that we do so we can prevent them, but also know the habits that we have to do whenever we're checking back in, that at least you can make it more of a human conversation by communicating to your buyer that there's self-awareness in the situation, you know that you're doing it. So how you do that is classic role diffusion. I'm excited that we can become a human to our buyer again. So that is everything. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. If you like this session and you want to hear more, go to flipthescript.co and make sure you check out all the other sales topics that we have there on the website. If you really love this session, go to Flip the Script on LinkedIn. Be sure to give us a follow and tell me your top 2 takeaways so I know what you want to hear more of. Either way, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Watch out.